Hi, everyone. Here's a short sequence to bring awareness to the upper body, increasing strength, flexibility, range of motion in the smaller joints, wrists, elbows. These movements can be practiced against a wall, the edge of a counter, or a chair. For clarity, I thought I would show them on a mat on the floor in hands and knees pose. So let's begin. I have extra padding for my knees, and I'll just begin to move around, shifting my weight from side to side, finding connection through my hands and support through the knees and the tops of the feet. So just shifting my weight forward and back, side to side, bringing in some circles, changing direction. And maybe even this movement can be practiced coming down onto the forearms and then shifting back to the hands. Coming down onto forearms, shifting back through the hands. Maybe staggering the hands, shifting forward and back, finding circles within the hips. Switching hands, switching arms. I'm just beginning to bring movement back into the spine. So rolling shoulders back and down, gentle tuck to the pelvis. See if there's a flexion within the spine as you hang your head heavy. Releasing any tension or stress in the head and the neck. Notice how the weight is shifting through the fingertip pads, the large pad of the thumb, the small finger pad. Maybe there's a rotation through the pelvis and extension through the spine as we lift the gaze. And again, space for observing the weight shift within those fingertip pads, thumb pad, and small finger side of the hand. Just allowing the breath to move naturally through you and exploring this movement through the hands and just opening up that awareness through each fingertip pad. So opening the space between the fingers, pressing down through the fingertip pads and allowing the first and second knuckle of the fingers to lift up gently as if you were a cat clawing a carpet. Just finding the activation through the fingertips. And when you press into the floor or into the mat, just notice any other activation of muscles through the forearm, perhaps all the way up into the shoulders as well. So very subtle movement here, pressing fingertips down into the mat or the floor, activating through the knuckles of the fingers. Feel free to move around as it feels comfortable. I like to stagger my hands and then slowly lift the wrists and then lower and switch it out. Lift the wrists and then lower. So the fingers, the pads of the thumb stay on the mat. Just work out the pace of the movement that feels comfortable. Again, switching out the stagger, lifting through the wrists, shifting the weight into the fingertip pads. And then walking the hands beyond the shoulders, perhaps coming up onto the fingertips, lifting the wrists and what I like to call tented fingers, and just allowing the head and neck to hang through the arms. Find your breath here. Gaze can come up, gentle slide with the hands back towards the center line of the torso. And then bring one hand underneath the gaze, extending one arm out to the side. I always like to move within these practices. So extending one arm, see what happens in the lower body. And then perhaps this arm can reach up towards the ceiling. So we begin to bring an opening through one side of the body. And then we can just half thread, open again. So find the pace of lifting and lowering that feels comfortable and challenging for you. Switch it out to the other side, or maybe even hold wherever it feels good. I'm not counting how many I did on one side into the other. I'm just going by sensation and feeling. And then shifting it out, maybe lowering through the forearms, right to left, and left to right. You can hold here, pressing forearms down, tucking the chin, gentle shake to the head and neck. Reestablishing the rhythm of your breath. Counter stretch through one hand, pressing in through the top of the hand, curling the fingers in towards the center line of the palm. You can rock forward and back, feeling the stretch through the forearm, maybe even all the way up into the shoulder. Maybe finding that rotation where the fingers hang off the mat. Reach out towards the side, away from the center line of the body. And then same on the other side. I always like to bring in a bit of rocking within the movement. Just that gentle rotation and adjustment through the wrists and the fingers. And then again with that staggered position with the hands, one hand beyond the shoulder and one hand closer towards the shoulder, we'll just begin to bring the nose to the mat. So just allowing the elbows to flex outward or towards the center line, whatever feels good. Nose to mat, and then pressing the mat away, finding that push back up. You may begin to feel this in the upper part of the spine, the long bone of the humerus from the shoulder to the elbow. And then one thing that I've begun to bring into the practice is this quality of bouncing. And sometimes that nose to mat and flexing through the knees will bring my feet up, pointing towards the ceiling, and then coming up, bouncing a bit. Still finding that strength within the hands and the fingers. Flexion through the elbows and the strength in the shoulders. You can switch it out here. Maybe beginning with that bouncing, buoyant movement on the other side. Just feeling into that momentum, bringing nose to mat, pushing hands away. And then slowing that movement down. Reconnecting to this natural flow of breath. Just readjusting through the low body, perhaps a wider knee here. Great toes might meet, settling into the hips. Flipping the hands over so the palms are up. So allowing the forearms to rest on the top side of the arm. Hanging the head heavy here. Just begin to shift the weight from side to side and curling the fingers in towards center palm. So very slowly bringing in this movement. It's nice to have this balance of rest and ease, and then subtle awareness within the smaller joints with moving. You can flip the palms over so you have this beautiful reach. Just picking up one hand and then the other. Slowly lifting through the wrist, tented fingers. Hanging the head here. Just feeling the difference in sensation through the underside of the arm. And then we can just begin to walk the hands towards one side. If you have a mat, maybe hanging off the mat. Breathing into the side body. Opening up through the spaces there between the rib cage. And just knowing that we have that three-dimensional quality to the rib cage, extending around to the back of the body, as well as the front and the sides. Walking through center. And then finding the stretch on the opposite side. And we'll walk the hands back through center. And then I like to bring this movement of a very slow walking of the hands, the rolling of the shoulders. Perhaps the gaze is at the edge of the mat or the floor, the edge of a wall, or maybe even you can lift the gaze up. Slowly lower, readjust the hands as is necessary, push away, hinge back with the knees and the hips. You can walk the forearms in, but there's this steadiness, this ease throughout the transitions, bringing in this sort of slow motion quality to the movement. And before we lower here from our cobra pose, maybe opening up into a seal pose. So the fingers are pointing away from the center line of the body. And I'm paying attention to fingertip pads, the pad of the thumb. I'm allowing for a softness to occur within my elbows and just a continuous movement of rolling shoulders forward and then back, and maybe even switching the direction. Rotating the fingers forward now, coming down, lifting up through the wrists, hanging the head heavy. Breathing into both sides of the body here. Shoulders, underarms, upper back. Maybe the breath will lift you up And then the breath will lower you down. You can open up the hands a little wider than the shoulders. And then you can always stagger one hand beyond the shoulder, one hand at the level of the shoulder. Just noticing sensation within this breath and movement practice. I like to come down onto the forearms. Take a gentle pause here. And finishing out the practice, either resting belly down with the arms folded and the forehead resting on the forearms, which would be my preference if I wasn't filming this, and then shift back up into child pose for another option. And again, folding the forearms and bringing the forehead to rest on them. And just noticing how you're feeling within the upper body. And with your mind's eye, maybe envisioning some of those movements against a wall and how the shift of the body weight might affect the sensation. But just taking time to allow for a bit of rest. Within the practice and assimilation of the movement. Hope that helps. And I'll be back soon with some movements for the lower body, smaller joints within the ankles and the knees as well. So see you soon.